So I do believe that also you get to decide, and you can change your mind, but you get to decide and say, this is the kind of work that I'm interested in. This is the kind of work that sets my heart aflame. This is the kind of work that I want to devote time to, because the reality is, if you're creating your own work as a musician, as a writer, as a sculptor, whatever, it takes hours of your life, and we only have one life. So my goodness, if you're going to spend days and days and days and weeks and months and years working on something, it better be something that makes your heart happy.
How awesome is that piece of advice? I feel like I could just stop the podcast right here and it would be a win. All right, so a nihilist, a realist, and an optimist walk into a bar. No, this is not the setup to a great joke, but part of the story of how my guest today became the incredible powerhouse human being that she is, and a little hint about the family she grew up with. And if you don't know by now, this is Chris from honestypill.com. You are listening to episode 34 of the Honesty Pill podcast. This season on the show, I'll be talking to people who are breaking the status quo, ditching outdated traditions, and building a better future for themselves and the people they work with. I'll be connecting you with musicians, sound healers, coaches, hip-hop artists, actors, and people who not only inspire and educate every single day, but who are experts at talking about what they do so you can get inspired in your own work. My guest today is actor, improviser, writer, producer, and comic genius Roni Geva. Also, a few quick trigger warnings for this episode. The actor Will Smith does come up in our conversation, and I should let you know that this interview was recorded pre-Oscars ceremony slap in the face, so when we don't bring up that topic, you will understand why, because it hadn't happened yet. Also, this episode deals with the topic of abortion. Roni is one of the most hilarious, bubbly people I have ever met, and she's also a master at shining a spotlight on history, civil rights, and other very serious things. And a quick note, if you're wondering why we're talking about serious things on a classical music podcast, what do you think artists and creatives should be doing with their voices? And if you're asking why a podcast hosted by a dude is talking about abortion, ask yourself, why shouldn't I concern myself with issues that relate to the health, happiness, and security of practically everyone on this planet? Okay, still here? Still listening? Awesome. This episode is not going to be a totally serious thing. There's some amazing behind-the-scenes look at how the TV and movies that you love are put together. Yes, we're going to talk about how the sausage is made in the Hollywood biz and even teach you a little bit of Hebrew. How about that? All right, let's jump into my conversation with Roni Geva. Here it comes. Names are important, and not everyone would think to use a comfort food to help people remember their name, but you do. Welcome to the podcast, Roni like Macaroni Geva.
Hi!
So glad you're here.
I'm so glad I'm here.
So, Roni, right there at the bottom of your website homepage, it says, "Hell hath no fury like me when I'm slightly inconvenienced and hungry." So before we dig in, I want to make sure, is this a good time to chat? Do you need anything? Are you good?
I just had 2 vegan banana pecan chocolate chip muffins. I'm good.
Of course you did.
They're muffins that are banana muffins that have nuts and chocolate. There's just no sugar or eggs or butter or anything that came from an animal in there.
Amazing. Wow. I am taking notes here on snacks that we need to incorporate. Roni, you are such a powerhouse of a human being. You're a dynamo, but you're also one of the most thoughtful listeners I know. Where does someone like Roni come from? And I mean, literally, where did you grow up? What was your family dynamic? Basically, what I'm asking is, Roni, tell me about your mother.
She's the best. I was born in a suburb of Tel Aviv, Israel. I lived there until the middle of 5th grade when I moved to a small town in Texas called College Station. I don't recommend growing up in a suburb of a bustling international city and moving to a tiny town in Texas. It does not do one good in the heart. So when I graduated high school, I immediately left, not because I don't love my family, but because I didn't feel like I belonged in College Station, Texas. And I moved to Chicago, where I went to Northwestern University. And then I stayed, met my man, made a human, and eventually ended up in LA. But if you want me to tell you about my mother and why I'm the way I am, I would say that I am the result of what happens when a nihilist and an optimist get married.
It sounds like the intro of a joke, right? A nihilist and an optimist walk into a bar.
Yes, they walk into a bar And and here's the thing, my dad is such a realist. He's the nihilist. He's so funny. He's so funny, but it's this like dry, macabre, wry humor. And he's incredibly thoughtful, and he doesn't care about ego. He's a genius. He's now an academic still, and he once told me, somebody stole one of his ideas, right? And I was like, my mom was furious because not only is she, because she's an optimist, she believes truly in her whole heart that individuals can change the whole world. And when someone is wronged, she must repair. And somebody stole his idea. And my mom, of course, was enraged. And he was like, fine about it. And I was like, aren't you mad? And he was like, do you think I only have one idea?
That's awesome.
So that's him. And then there's this justice seeking optimist who believes that it is our duty on planet Earth to make it a better place. Like, she genuinely believes that. She wants to make the interaction with the person at Target a better experience for all. So she will educate that checkout person if they're not up to par, right? Like, that is her humanity. And it's kind of like somewhere between a total hard ass and just the biggest heart in the world, and like raging optimism and justice seeking. That's who I grew up with, which is why I am the way I am.
How did your parents meet?
This is the best story in the world. They were both in the Israeli army, and my dad was, I believe, serving on the border with Lebanon. My mom was in Tel Aviv, like doing office work kind of stuff. She actually worked with immigrants, social justice, my mom. But anyway, and it was the 60s in Israel. And my mom went to a party, and she was getting ready to go to the party. And my mom had long, thick, gorgeous black hair. And she's like petite and had this gorgeous figure and thick glasses. And she comes out and shows my grandmother her outfit. And my grandmother's like, you look beautiful. Lose the glasses. They're terrible. And my mom was like, I'm blind. And my grandmother was like, you look terrible. So she took off her glasses and went to this party. My dad found out he had like a couple nights off and like hitchhiked his way down from Lebanon to Tel Aviv, which, by the way, that sounds crazy, but it's like 2 hours. It's very small. Israel is very small. And went to this party. So he's in his fatigue, sitting there like smoking a cigarette in the corner because it's, the 60s. And my mom comes in and sees this man who she thinks is her boyfriend because she doesn't have her glasses on. And then she runs across the room and leaps into his arms and kisses him.
Oh my God.
And then she's like, oh no. And that is how they met.
So we're gonna get into a little bit of the other type of work that you do, but I feel like this needs to be written into some kind of comedy show, something or other.
I have been trying for years. I have so many ideas that include this. I actually wrote this story for my college entrance essays when it's like, tell us about your origin or whatever. And I was like, I'm going to write a play. And I wrote for my college essays, I wrote a play about how my parents met.
I'm actually seeing a musical. I'm feeling like there could be a great song about he kissed me and I didn't know him.
Yes.
But I liked his fatigues. I don't know. We're gonna workshop this. So
yes, we're gonna workshop it.
Sometimes instrumental musicians, which is a large part of the audience that listens to this podcast, become so attached to their identities that we often include it when we introduce ourselves. And nobody asked, right? Like, hi, I'm Chris. I'm a trumpet player, which is really normal in musician circles, especially when you meet people at a music festival or an orchestra gig or a big donor dinner or whatever. People introduce themselves that way. It's kind of weird social behavior, though, when you're at a spot that's not musicians. People don't normally do that sort of thing. You wear so many hats, Roni. If we met at a party, how would you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Roni. Tell me about yourself.
I knew you were going to answer that question sort of like that, because which is such an interesting, almost like a deflection way to introduce, because you have so many interesting things that you could say about yourself, but you're more interested in other people.
Well, and we can get into this if you want, but one of the greatest business lessons I've learned, and it has helped me in every career that I have, and as you said, I have multiple, is be the most interested person in the room.
Oh, I love that.
And here's the most amazing thing that if you try and start playing this game with humans around you all the time, you will be wowed by how it changes your everything. And here's the game. The game goes, I will know everything about you and you will know nothing about me and you will want to be friends with me. So in the olden days when, we went on airplanes and we weren't all like avoiding each other, I used to travel a lot for work and for everything. And I would just sit next to a person and that would be the game. I'm going to know everything about you when we get off the plane and you are going to give me all of your contact information and be like, you're just the greatest girl I've ever met. I had such a nice time getting to know you, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, you don't know anything about me. But because I made you feel comfortable enough to tell me everything about you, we all love talking about ourselves. That's our favorite thing to do. If you just become that for other people, they will love you, they will trust you, and they will give you money if that's the ultimate thing that you want them to do.
Well, I said that earlier, that you are an incredible listener. And that's because I think that you've probably, used that sort of conversational technique on me when we first met. And I had a bad habit, and this has also become the socially stunted thing musicians do, of meeting people and suddenly finding myself talking about myself. And I would suddenly mid-sentence notice it happening and get really self-conscious. Like, why am I the only person talking about me? Probably because it was someone who was using that technique. Where did you, or why did you come up with that? Or where did you learn that? Why is that a thing?
Why is that a thing? So I came up in comedy land, which is full of people that are just like musicians, right? Like, hi, I'm Roni. I'm a stand-up. I'm not a stand-up, by the way. I've done stand-up one time and it was terrible. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. It was so bad. And comedians are a very special kind of people that I love, but they are about, I'm going to outwit the next person. So everything's a bit. So that's how I came up, right? So I am really good at ruling a conversation, at making everybody laugh, at making the whole thing about me. I'm actually really good at it. But here's the thing. If you want to be successful at anything, you have to be a people connector, not in the spotlight. Not really, right? Which is a crazy thing to say, because then you might think, well, like, but what about J-Lo? She's in the spotlight. Yeah, but if you think about J-Lo's systems of humans that are around her facilitating what J-Lo does, that's probably because she got really good at connecting with people. And I have no idea. I've never read anything about J-Lo. But do you know what I'm saying? So for me, when I was 25, 26, I don't remember. I started a business in the social selling world, and I wasn't good at it. And that was really hard for me because I'm usually good at things and I wasn't good at it. And so rather than running away, which is usually what I do, like if I'm not good at a sport, I'll just be like, well, I'm just not good at sports. Bye. But instead I was like, oh, I'm not good at business, but I really believe in what this business can do. Maybe I need to figure out why I'm not good at this business. And I became a student of entrepreneurship, of business, of social selling, of the history of the game, all of it. And over and over and over again, the messaging was, I mean, there's lots of messages, but one of them was, get really good at listening. Get really good at it. And so even as an actor, and absolutely as an actor, you have to be really good at listening, which brings me back to my comedy days. So here's, and this is sort of like a very roundabout thing that I'm like, I feel like I'm like, and this and this and this, but like, also this really makes sense. I believe that every single person on earth should take one improv class one time, because improv, there are a few rules of improv. The first rule is say yes. The second rule is don't ask questions. And the third rule is make the person next to you look as best as they can. So how do you do that? By listening to them and saying yes to what they're saying and building on that, right? So if you said, the greatest example was Del Close, who's one of the greatest improv teachers in the world. He was doing a scene, I believe, with Joan Rivers, right? This is crazy. And Del says, ugh, the children are driving me crazy. And Joan Rivers, to get the laugh, said, what children? We don't have any children.
It's pretty good.
Right? Go Joan. That's very selfish.
But,
she just got to laugh for herself. She didn't make him look good. She didn't say yes. And she didn't add any information that was helpful to him.
She shut it down.
So guess what Del did? He listened. He said yes. And he added more information, making her look good. He goes, oh, what happened to the children? They got kidnapped, right? And then the whole scene went into that space. And so, having been a student of improv since I was like 18 years old, that just became automatic. You have to listen and listen and listen and listen. And then you remember everything because you need to, because you're going to use it to build the scene better. So it was a combination of my improv training, my realization that as a comedy person, I was really making everything about myself, which made me suck at business. And then deciding that I didn't want to suck at business and reading all the books that were like, can you just be a better listener? And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. And then I could circle back to my OG beginnings of like, oh, I'm actually really good at that.
Amazing. It totally, and it's all connected and related, whether you're an actor or a comic or a musician or an entrepreneur or whatever, that ability to listen and hold space for somebody else to do their best independent thinking is something that sadly I only learned in the past few years how to actively do it, because there are techniques of how to be a good listener. It's not just keeping your mouth shut. We can talk more about that. But, for my field, being a professional musician in a major orchestra, there is a very specific career path. In fact, musicians sometimes have a hard time understanding how they can find work outside that traditional career path if they want to. My impression is that acting is different. What are some traditional ways that people get into professional acting? Or is there like a through line for that?
I mean, there are so many through lines. We could take all those lines and make a sweater. It's ridiculous. So, some people get into acting when they're little kids, right? And they do acting as a little kid. And if they live in a place like Los Angeles or Chicago, or really any major city that has a professional theater, often those professional theaters will need a child. And if you love it so much and your parents are willing, you can get into acting that way. For a lot of people in New York and LA, that in London and Tel Aviv and et cetera, it's like you also have the capacity to do that with auditioning for films and TV, right? If you live somewhere where that's accessible to you. And you want to be an actor when you're little and you're just like, here I go. I mean, and obviously everyone can change their mind. So that's one way. Another way is, go to university or a conservatory and study and get really good at your craft, and then move somewhere where the work is and audition. And just like with musicians, until you land that tenured gig at an orchestra, right? Like, so the actors actually don't have that in the United States, right? We don't have the and then I'm going to be, a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company and be promised that I do this many plays every year. Like, that doesn't happen so much in the United States. And so it really is like, you just keep going for gigs forever. and one of the greatest interviews I ever heard was with Mandy Patinkin, who, listeners, if you don't know who he is, he's an amazing actor and musical theater genius, and also was Inigo Montoya in Princess Bride. So that's like shorthand.
There's
Inigo
your context.
Montoya.
There you go.
So Inigo Montoya won the Tony. He won the freaking Tony, which is like the Oscars for plays and musicals. And then the next week he got a phone call and he was like, oh yeah, the offers are coming in and I don't have to audition anymore. And it was a call was asking him to audition for a play. And he was like, but I just won a Tony.
You can bring your Tony, but you still have to audition.
Yeah, exactly. And so yes, in acting, some people get to a point in their career where they do just get offers, right? Think, Olivia Colman or Patrick Stewart or, Idris Elba. I don't think Idris Elba is auditioning these days. I think he just gets invited to be in movies and TV shows. However, he did have to audition for a really, 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 really long time. And most actors never leave the space of having to audition forever and ever. And that's okay, because just like musicians, it's the thing in our DNA and our bone marrow that is, I have to do this until maybe I don't. And then I change my mind and I do something else and I reinvent myself. But there is no like, and then I go to Yale Drama School for graduate school. And then I move out to Los Angeles and I get with the best agency in town. And then I become a series regular on the television show. Like, that sounds great. And it happens, but not very often.
This ties back into the networking and the social skills that you were talking about at the top of the interview, that since you are always looking for the next thing and the next thing is coming to you by being creative, maybe you create the next thing yourself, but you have to have the skills and be open to finding that thing. We could have a whole podcast on this one topic about how your mindset about rejection, about imposter syndrome, about perfection is the biggest barrier, probably even more, I think, than the skills required. Or at least if you have the skills to be a great actor or a great comic, they're sort of meaningless if you don't have the mechanisms to get the job or get in the right space to have the possibility of getting the job. So speaking of new ideas, when they don't exist, you have to be able to not only create those things, but convince others to stop and listen to you and hopefully buy in. And I mean that in terms of actually buy something, a product or a service that you're selling, or buy into your screenplay or your stand-up act or whatever, so that they say, yes, I want that. And I'll be willing to not only pay you for it, but show up and hopefully connect with you. How do you come up with something totally new? I'm thinking in terms of musicians. I was talking to a composer a few weeks ago, and he said, everything has sort of already been written. There's nothing new. All you're doing is connecting the patterns that you already experienced in different ways with your own voice behind it. So are you considering what's already out there and looking for gaps, or are these ideas coming to you totally on their own when you create something new?
So as a writer, I have to say that it kind of depends. A lot of times it's, I read this article and it was so weird and funny, and and I had an idea, right? Other times it's, this funny thing happened to me when I was a kid, and I actually think it would make a really good TV show, or I think it would make a really good movie. Or sometimes it's, I want to write a rom-com. What do I want to write a rom-com about? And I remember this felt like a universal download, right? Where you're just standing there and all of a sudden, like, the beams of light shine on you from the sky and you're like, I know what I'm going to write about. So my writing partner and I wanted to write a rom-com, and we were literally we were at an event. We were at a party where we were supposed to be schmoozing with people, and we weren't. We were schmoozing with one another. And we sat in the corner because we were like, we really want to write a rom-com. What about this idea? No. What about this idea? No. And there was no ego about it. And I am so grateful to be writing with the amazing Margaret Catch, because we don't have ego about it. For us, it's the end product is really important. And so everything that gets in the way of that is moot. And so I don't ever take it personally. And she's like, I hate your idea. It's like, okay, great. Moving on. And so we were just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then, the clouds parted, the sun shone on me. And I looked at her and I said, I know what we're writing this rom-com about. And she said, what? And I said, Alzheimer's. So we have an Alzheimer's rom-com that we wrote. And that idea, came from the sky. But another thing that happened is that a friend of mine gave me a book and said, I want you to adapt this book into a film. And I said, let me read the book and decide if that's okay with me. Right. And that's where the idea came from. Right. It wasn't a fresh new idea. It was literally, somebody handed me a book and I said, okay, I'll adapt it. We're going to pause the podcast for a second because I need to close the door.
Go for it. I'll give you the play-by-play, listeners. Roni has stood up. She's walked across the room. She's closing the door. She's now back in her seat. And now she's back in her chair.
So here's what I believe about ideas. Have you ever read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
One of my favorite books, over and over and over.
I love that book. It's a book for all artists. She says, she talks about ideas like they're sentient beings and that like they go around and they kiss a whole lot of people with the hopes that somebody makes them. And then, 3 movies come out in 1 year that are all about, dinosaurs or whatever. And that's because in her eyes, it's like the idea went and kissed a whole bunch of people and then people made it. And I really believe in that. I believe in being open and saying yes, but I also believe in having a mission statement. So for me, what that looks like is my writing partner and I love to shine a light on topics that are hard to talk about using comedy. Hence, Alzheimer's rom-com, comedy about a women's clinic, etc. I mean, I could run through the litany of everything we've written, but that is really important to us. So if someone is like, if an idea comes and kisses me, but that idea is, a basic rom-com about a girl at a bookshop and, the guy, I'm literally doing the Tom Hanks movie, that story, right? I probably wouldn't write it. I'm not the person to write that idea. That's not my mission. That's not in the umbrella of my mission statement about things that I get really excited to write. So I do believe that also you get to decide, and you can change your mind, but you get to decide and say, this is the kind of work that I'm interested in. This is the kind of work that sets my heart aflame. This is the kind of work that I want to devote time to, because the reality is if you're creating your own work as a musician, as a writer, as a sculptor, whatever, it takes hours of your life, and we only have one life. So my goodness, if you're going to spend days and days and days and weeks and months and years working on something, it better be something that makes your heart happy.
And we'll be right back. I want to give a huge thanks to the sponsor of the Honesty Pill podcast, Yamaha Corporation of America. I've been playing Yamaha equipment for decades in my own practice room, on stage with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, or touring all over the world, and Yamaha has been an absolute game changer. Something I love about Yamaha is the way they pursue excellence in all of their work and at all levels. They are as dedicated to bringing quality work for beginning students as they are for marquee artists. I admire their commitment to continuous improvement and creating a community that includes all of the musicians they serve. Make every note count. Play Yamaha. Hey everybody, one more thing before we get back to the show. I have sitting behind me on my bookshelf tons of books that I have read over the years as I was preparing for auditions. Books on sports psychology, books on developing good habits, books on improving your mindset, and books that are just awesome reading material to help you navigate a life in the arts. If you'd like a copy of my Audition Accelerator recommended reading for auditioners PDF sent right to your inbox, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to honestypill.com/subscribe, and you're going to put your name and your email in there, and I'm going to send you this list immediately. That's it. You can print it off, stick it to the wall next to your toothbrush. Then, as a subscriber, you will get emails from me now and then, and I promise I don't email too much, with amazing information, thoughts, announcements, offers, totally keeping you in the Honesty Pill mission control loop. So become a subscriber right now to get the book list, and go to honestypill.com/subscribe. I'll see you inside. Okay, let's get back to the show. I'm thinking of someone who's sitting down with a blank piece of paper. I want to create something. I need to make something. That's definitely part of it. You have to do the work, right? But it sounds like what you're saying too is you are so open to the possibilities of these ideas that go around looking for someone to bring them to life that you probably are seeing more of those opportunities in someone who's either only focused on the work or doesn't know they need to be open. And I totally believe what you said and what Elizabeth Gilbert says, that ideas do land on your shoulder asking for you to do the work. And if you ignore them, they don't hang around and they go find someone else. And then you will find someone who just created your course or wrote your movie or composed your piece, because the ideas will look for someone to come to life. So you can't get bitter, by the way, folks, when that happens. You have to say, well, dang it, that was mine and now it's gone.
I mean, I have to tell you, I wrote the opening of the movie WALL-E, Pixar's WALL-E. I wrote as a clowning show in Chicago, and I never did it. And then when WALL-E came out, I was like, well, golly, they did that a bajillion times better than I could have ever done it. And it continues to be one of my favorite movies because guess what? That idea kissed me too. And it was in my heart. And then somebody else made it and they did a way better job than I could have ever done. And I wasn't bitter about it. Like you said, I was just joyous that somebody actually took it and made good, you know?
Great segue into this question. I'm kind of getting out of order of what I wanted to ask you, but I want to bring this up. You co-created, wrote, produced, and starred in a twice Emmy-nominated comedic short form series called Control Alt Delete, which was featured in the Washington Post, New York Times, all over the place, and notably The Guardian called it the bravest television show in America. Can you tell me why you created the show and why did you choose this topic for a comedy?
Absolutely. So years ago, I had an abortion. Welcome to the podcast, listeners. And I'm so glad I had it. And that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that happened was not a narrative I heard anywhere. But when I talked to other women who also had abortions, they were like, oh my God, thank God I had an abortion. I really, really didn't want to become a parent at that moment in my life, right? And so the overwhelming, sort of colloquial experience amongst my peers was, oh, thank God, relief. But the actual narrative that is being sold by television, movies, books, and magazines was tragedia. Like it's just a terrible tragedy. And it was so tough and hard. And my day, when I actually went and had it, the people who were in that clinic were like out of a sitcom, right? So I had to speak to a counselor about my decision. A lot of states make you do this. Nowadays, a lot of states will also give you a mandatory 72-hour waiting period, et cetera. But at the time, this was in Chicago, and we can do a whole nother podcast about why that's frustrating. But the woman I spoke with was the counselor for the clinic. And I was very clear. I was like, I'm good. I really don't want to do this. I'm very excited to be here. Let's go. But we had to sit there for 10 minutes. And so, being me, I was like, what else do you do other than being, the counselor at this clinic? And she said, oh, well, I'm actually part of the zero population growth movement. And I was like, I'm sorry, like no more people on Earth, that one? And she said, yeah. And then we talked about that for a long time. And it was like hilarious. But also I didn't laugh at her face because I was like, I honestly was like, is this a prank show? Like what is happening? And then when I actually was getting my procedure, the doctor was this like sweet, nebbishy little Jewish man that was very, was older. And like, while my feet are still up in the stirrups, he's like, so Nurse Nancy tells me you're a comedian. Let's hear a joke. Right. And like, I told him a joke because I'm a pleaser. I told him a joke. So the whole day was just very silly, right? Lots of silly things kept happening. And of course, at the end of the day, I just felt relief and I was grateful. So because this story wasn't being told anywhere, that like my story, one of the things I do is storytelling. And so I would do storytelling about my experience. And it would, to mixed results. Some people found it very funny. Some people were like, oh, because no one had ever talked to them about the relief that actually scientifically proven something like close to 90% of women feel after their procedure. So anyway, then I meet my writing partner. Turns out she had an abortion at the same clinic a few years later. And she also had a very similar experience where things were funny and she felt relief, and that was it. So we decided to sort of like be the comedy we want to see in the world. And we said, you know what, let's make a show that's based in reality. Let's interview lots of women and let's interview lots of clinics. And we cold called every independent clinic in these United States. And we're like, hi, we're making a TV show about clinics. Do you want to share any stories with us? And what was astonishing is that every clinic, we would always ask, like, if you were watching this TV show, what would you want to see? And every clinic was like, we just want people to see how funny this workplace is and how normal it is and how we're normal and that this is normal. And like most people are fine. And there's just no drama here. And so we were so inspired by all of that that we wrote, 2 seasons of a show that's about a women's clinic. And we made sure that it was inclusive comedy instead of, push you away, make you feel stupid comedy. So there's sort of 2 ways of doing it, right? There's 2 camps. And our camp is, we're going to be earnest, we're going to be full of heart, and we're going to be still really, really funny, so that you, viewer, can either A, take off the backpack of shame that maybe you've been carrying around because society has made you feel that you're supposed to feel shame about this thing that maybe you don't feel shame about, but you feel shame about it because society made you feel like it. Or if you've never had the procedure, or you think you don't know anyone who's had it, but you probably do, they just didn't tell you, that you see, oh, that woman looks just like me. Or, oh, that doctor looks just like my dad. That woman at the front desk is just like my best friend. Right. And we wanted people to feel a sense of community when watching this, so that we could do our part in sort of using comedy to change hearts and minds, because that's really what comedy can do. You're not going to change hearts and minds with the drama. You're going to get people invested, but comedy is where change happens. And like the greatest example of that is Will and Grace. Right? Will and Grace happened. All of a sudden, everyone in America had a gay best friend. They were on TV, but they were their gay best friend. So when Love is Love passes to the Supreme Court, the world isn't like, oh, what? I don't know anything about gay people. That didn't happen. Will and Grace laid the groundwork for social change in this country. I Love Lucy laid the groundwork for interracial marriage in this country, right? So to us, it felt very much like we can do what we can do, which is make this show a little small, but hopefully it'll make really, really big waves, so that eventually this show can exist sort of like as a half-hour TV show that you can just watch on, whatever network. And the more hearts and minds we can change, the better. And what ended up happening is we would get, notes from people that would say, I totally didn't expect to like this show. I turned it on so that I could hate watch it, and I love it. And I'm so grateful you made it, which was the point. And then lots of people sent us their abortion stories, and said, like, I've never told anybody this story, but here's my story, which is also the point, right? Is to make people feel safe. And so, it was a project that probably took years off my life due to the stress of making a TV show, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I was going to ask you why comedy is such a powerful vehicle to talk about difficult topics, but you just sort of outlined it. And you are, Ron, you're a virtuoso at explaining controversial ideas to mixed crowds, which I think is one of your superpowers. Can you give us your definition of a feminist?
Someone who believes that men and women should have access to all the same thing. The end.
The end. So here's a follow-up question. I'm asking this because I think it needs to be asked. Can a man be a feminist?
Men should be feminists. How dare they not be?
Exactly. Well, look around, right?
I mean, I know. And it's like, I was just listening. There's a political party in Spain making great headway, whose whole message is that any laws that are being made to create equality between the sexes should be undone. And I was like, what? It's 2022, dudes. Get with the program. So, not every man is a feminist, but we all should be, because it's one of those things. I was on a radio program once and I was being interviewed, and the woman was like, I don't know if I'm a feminist. And I was like, okay, can I ask you a question? She's like, yeah. And I was like, do you believe that you should be able to have the same pay for the same job as a man? And she was like, yeah. I was like, great, you're a feminist. I'm glad we had this talk. Like, that's it.
Okay, listeners, this next question might contain a tiny little spoiler alert for basically most of the funny movies that you're watching. So you might want to cover your ears if you don't want to hear this. Roni, when you talked to me about the timing in comic movie structure that exists, you kind of shook my world. You changed how I watched pretty much everything. I'd love for you to give that explanation again if you can. Can you explain, how do you describe the acts of a comic movie?
Oh, sure. We were literally just watching Ghostbusters Afterlife last night, and my poor family, I paused to point out to them, like, haha, see, it happened. So basically, around 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning of the movie, our heroes are set on their journey. So if you're looking at a movie like Jumanji, right? The new one with The Rock. It's when they get sent to Jumanji from like the detention, right? Then you have about 15 to 25 minutes of them deciding, like, are we actually going to say yes to this thing that happened to us? So it could be anything. It's like, oh, we moved to a small town and we hate it here. Are we going to say yes to staying? Right. So we have like 20 to 30 minutes of that debate. And then on around the 30th minute of a movie, they say yes. So in Jumanji, what's amazing, and this is just the great, it's so formulaic, this movie, and I love it. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love a formula. And the 30th minute, they literally say, we have to save Jumanji. And it was like, oh, well, and off we go to the races because they said yes to the question that was presented around 10 to 15 minutes. And so last night when we were watching the movie, it was, oh, there really are ghosts in this town. Let's try and catch them. Right. And so then we have Act Two, which is, it starts with the fun and games of what happens when you say yes. Right. So now we're going to do all these fun things to try and catch ghosts. Or now we're going to do all these fun things to try and save Jumanji. Right. Until you get to literally the halfway point in the movie where something happens that makes the heroes have to double down. Right. So whatever it is, something happens that makes the heroes have to double down. So I think in Jumanji, like the guy that was lost years before is kidnapped again, maybe something like that. It's been a while since I watched it. I can tell you last night, it's when Carrie Coon and Paul Rudd get possessed by the monsters. Right? So it's like, boom, I like paused. I was like, ah, and there you go. That's the midpoint. And then, and so then it's a version of the fun stuff that was happening that's a lot heavier in consequence. So, right. So, you know, we double down on whatever it is that we're trying to do. So, you know, last night when I'm watching this movie, they're really trying to catch the ghost. And then around, depending on how long this movie, 75 to 85 minutes, there's a thing called the Dark Night of the Soul where, oh my God, everything is lost. We're going to lose for sure. There's no way we're going to win this battle. If it's a rom-com, I'm not going to get the guy, or I'm not going to get the girl, you know, whatever. It's like, everything sucks. I lost my job. The girl hates me. My mom died. Like, everything terrible happens. And then just when they're at the lowest, there's a light. It changes everything, fixes it. And then it's like 10 minutes left and that's the end of the movie, right? We resolve. And once you start watching movies, you will just be like, oh, that's literally the structure of every movie, not just comedy movies, every movie, a drama. It's just often, you know, in the drama, the resolve is not necessarily a good ending, right? The resolve might be a bad ending. And it's really about, if you think about movies as a hero's story, it's how does the hero win the movie? And sometimes the hero wins the movie by getting the girl, but sometimes the hero wins the movie by not getting the girl and growing up as a person, right? So it's really like, which then, if you think about it for yourself, your career as a musician, as an artist, and whatever, it's how do you win the movie of your life? How, right? Are you in the Dark Night of the Soul? I hope not. I hope if you're listening to this, you are not. But if you are, A, know that there are people you can call that can help you. But B, know that the resolution is coming and what you need to win is there. So, you know, yes, I know I was just talking about movie structure, which is really like insider baseball for writers.
Roni, I've heard you talk about comedy jail. Can you explain to me what that is again?
Yes. Comedy jail is my theory about people who are funny. So they don't have to be doing professional comedy. If you know people who are funny, this applies to them as well. In any movie that's about a prison, right? Like Shawshank Redemption, whatever, pick a movie. There's that scene where they're all in the cafeteria and everyone like has their tray and it's like, what are you in for? It's like, I burned a house, I killed a guy, you know, whatever. Comedy jail is the same. If you imagine all of us people who are funny are sitting down at a cafeteria, it's like, oh, what'd you do? It's like, I was a fat kid. My parents had a horrible divorce. I was a social pariah. Pick a thing that was terrible in your youth. which then, because it was hard, made you develop a defense mechanism. And that defense mechanism was making jokes. And now you're funny, right? And so I do believe that some people, depending on their parents and their situation, whatever, are sort of born to look at the world with a funny, quirky lens, right? So I was already a silly, kind of funny person. I made jokes a lot, etc. But it wasn't until I moved to the United States when I was in 5th grade and became a social pariah. And it was so hard. And I cried every day and then dealt with profound depression, that the funny came, right? The funny came because it was my defense mechanism against the really tough circumstances that I was in.
Can you explain the difference between stand-up and improv? Because I've made the mistake that all comedians have a stand-up background, and I bet some of my listeners do also.
So stand-up is Jerry Seinfeld, right? That's the easiest one to go to because most people have seen it. However, if you were born after 1990, stand-up is, oh gosh, now I need to think of someone who's current, and of course I can't. But stand-up is by yourself on stage, telling stories that are actually setups to jokes. Hannah Gadsby, that would be a current stand-up person. And if you haven't seen her work, please do. She's amazing. So that's stand-up. Improv is you plus at least one other person. So it might be 2 of you, it might be 6 of you, right? And there's really 2 kinds. One is called short form and one is called long form. Short form is like, whose line is it anyway? So if you've ever watched Whose Line Is It Anyway, it's games, right? The game is we're all at a party and you are a celebrity ghost person and we have to and based on what you say and how you act, we're supposed to guess who the guest is, right? That's short form improv. It's really about being very funny, very quippy, very quick. I love watching Whose Line Is It Anyway. It's fabulous. It's so fun. So that's short form improv. Long form improv is basically like a play. So the 2 people or the group get a suggestion from the audience, and then they riff on that suggestion for 20 to 30 minutes. There is a structure to it. So as they're going through it, it's not like random non sequiturs. It really feels like a play. It feels like act 1, a group song, act 2, a group song, act 3. So I used to do both just regular improv, and I used to do musical improv, and I used to do short form improv. So I used to do all of those things. But if you look through my life, the things that have given me the most joy is working in an ensemble with other people, at least one, if not more. So I could be a writer all by myself. I just don't think it's as fun, and I don't think it's as good, because when we work with other people, our point of view has to be sharpened, right? When you're trying to get your point across to somebody else, you're really selling the other person on your point of view. You have to get them on board, which means you have to really know why that's your point of view and why you're trying to sell it. And I think it makes you better at everything. And so improv is really a group practice, whereas stand-up is lone wolf.
So you did it again. You answered one of my questions I was going to ask earlier, which was going to be, should everyone do like an open mic night once? Should everyone do karaoke once? Should everyone do an improv class? Like, should you step into that if it's scary?
I mean, if it's scary, you should try it for sure. Everyone should do karaoke because karaoke is ridiculous and fun. Because we all do it anyway in our cars and in our showers. And so might as well just do it to feel that feeling in your stomach, like you're going to have diarrhea in 1 second. That feeling, everyone should have at least once, because when you're done, you will feel so victorious that self-love, you can dine out on that for like a month. So do karaoke for that. Stand-up might not make you feel that way, because when you fail at stand-up, it makes you feel like you failed as a human being. So it's very different than karaoke. It's very unsafe, actually. Karaoke is very safe. Stand-up feels very unsafe. Improv, if you're just taking a class, it's just for shits and grins, right? That's what improv class is. You're not going to go become a professional on SNL. You're just taking a class for funsies. And being in the practice of saying yes, of making the other person look good, of listening really well, that's just going to bleed into everything else you do in your life and make you better. And so I really do think that improv as a class as a very safe class is really, really useful. Because a lot of people come into improv class and they're like, I just have to be super clever. Like, whose line is it anyway? It's like, no, you don't. That's making it about you. Why don't you make it about your scene partner and see what happens? And it'll be funnier because you're actually making it about the given circumstances that you're in instead of something that you decided in your head that's very, very selfish. And I know a lot of people actually who run programs that go into corporate situations and do like an improv class for corporations because it makes you better at management. It makes you better at sales. It just makes you better.
Roni, what's the difference between people who make it and people who don't? Assuming that two people have equal talent, what choices does the successful person make that the unsuccessful person doesn't?
That is such a good question. So Will Smith has this really great quote, and I'm going to botch it. I'm so sorry, Will Smith, but here we go. Will Smith says he's not the most talented, and he's not the smartest, and he's not the prettiest, and he's just a guy who has a lot of talent, and he doesn't shy away from that. But he's like, I will outrun anyone on the treadmill. I will die on the treadmill before I get off. And that's the difference, right? So there's a great book called The Miracle Equation, and it's unwavering faith plus a good work ethic equals miracles, right? And it goes right along with that quote that people say, like, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So here's the thing. As I said before, I'm kind of naturally talented at stuff. I can usually be at many things, not everything, right? I'm not particularly good at sports. I'm not the most coordinated human being on the planet, but there's a lot of things that I'm just naturally good at. However, if I want to get to the levels of greatness that I want to get to, I have to do daily work on that stuff, right? I write every day. I do stuff for my acting career every day. I do stuff for my business every day. And that's the difference. There's another book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Don't love him as a human, but the book has a really great message, which is greatness is determined by little tiny acts that you could or could not do every day. Like, does it really matter if I have a Big Mac today? No. But compounded over time, if I have a Big Mac here and there, every once in a while, regularly, my arteries will get clogged and I will probably have some sort of heart disease, right? That's just how it is. It's a tiny decision. Do I need to make these 5 sales calls today? I do. Will the world end if I don't? It will not. But compounded over time, that neglect, even though it's tiny, you wouldn't call it neglect. That's not the definition of neglect. But that tiny neglect compounded over time makes my business shrink, right? It's like when you don't practice your instrument. Sorry, dude, you got to practice your instrument or you're not going to get better. And it doesn't matter if you're a professional, right? I'm a professional actor. I get paid to make pretend. But I have to go to the gym. It's like being an athlete, right? If you're going to be in the Olympics, you work out even when you're not competing in the Olympics. You work out every day. And so that's, I think, the difference between being an Olympian and winning your, local league. That's the difference. It's what you do when no one's watching.
Do you have a mentor?
Yes.
Because the reason, and I want to hear about it briefly, but the reason I ask is I know there are people listening who are totally, the Will Smith thing. I will get on the treadmill. Great. Let's go. I will run. I will do it. But they're not sure they're running in the right direction, or they're not sure they're focusing on the right thing. It's like a dog digging up the backyard looking for a bone. If you're in the wrong backyard, you're never going to find the bone no matter how hard you work. So how do you connect that drive, if you possess it, where you're willing to step up and do the Will Smith treadmill thing? How do you know that you're going down the right path?
So there's a few ways. First is we live in the information age. So let's say you have a hero, and that is name a musician that's heroic to you, or that is name a business person that's heroic to you. In all likelihood, they have a podcast, they have a website, they probably have a book. You can suck up all of their information for as close to free as possible without even hiring a coach, right? So in the social selling space that I'm in, there's so many great podcasts, but one of them is called Your Virtual Upline. Now, you can pay the guy who does that podcast lots of money to be your coach, but you can also just listen to his podcast and get so much useful information so that he points you to the correct backyard to go do the digging in. Now, if you pay him, you'll probably get to that backyard faster. But if you don't have the cash flow right now, you can listen to a free podcast and get tons of information. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you can mastermind with a whole lot of other dogs who maybe are all in the same space as you are, but all digging around in the wrong backyards together. But if all of you together share, oh, I heard about this yard that I think has lots of bones in the back, then all of you can go try it together. So masterminding is really important. I'm in a mastermind with writers. I'm in a mastermind with actors. I'm in a mastermind with fellow social sellers. And we all learn together from each other's successes and failures. And so again, is it free? Yes. Sometimes it's not free, but it's not a lot of money. It's not going to be more than like $100 a month to be part of a mastermind where you can have collective learning. So that's another thing. And then lastly, you can get a mentor. And there's different ways to get a mentor. So you can get a business coach, right? Chris is a coach. You can hire Chris. But there's lots of other coaches for lots of other things, right? You can get a coach for learning how to organize your house. You can get a coach in learning how to exercise your body, right? There's all kinds of coaches that you can get. And I recommend that if you're feeling really lost and that no matter how many podcasts you listen to and how many fellow dogs you're hanging around with, you really don't know, and you're feeling that overwhelm, and overwhelm is a feeling of indecision, have somebody tell you what to do. And I will tell you why. From the time you are born until you are about 22 to 30, depending on if you do grad school or not, you are literally told what to do, how to think it by other people. So as a human being, you have been trained to be somebody's bitch your whole life, right? And so you're used to the idea of having somebody tell you what to do. Somebody who knows a little bit more than you, who's like 3 pages ahead in the book, being like, well, this is where you need to go. And that's what a mentor is. So you can pay them, or if there's somebody that you know in your community, whatever, you can offer a trade. You can say, Donna, I think you're so amazing. This literally happened to me. I think you're so amazing. I would love to once a month buy you dinner and get some coaching from you. And in exchange, I will do the same with anyone in your organization. This is in my business. Anyone in your organization that needs my help, that's not as far as I am, and so your coaching isn't helpful to them, but my coaching would be. Fair trade.
Brilliant.
She said yes, right? I know someone who wanted to learn about real estate. And there was like a real estate person in his town that he just really wanted to work with. And that guy was like, listen, dude, I'm really busy. And he was like, you got it. And then he started showing up at that guy's house every Sunday morning and mowing his lawn. He just mowed his lawn every Sunday. So eventually the guy at the end of the lawn mowing would be like, come in, let me get you some coffee. And they would sit and have coffee once a week on Sundays after he mowed his lawn. Now, be careful. Don't do that if like that's weird and you might get arrested. But just know you can think outside the box. If there's someone that you want to talk to, you can talk to them. And here's the other thing, and this is really important to know. Most people who get where you want to be want to help you get there too. They are not selfish. They want to help. So, for example, there's a woman I met in my kids' school, and she is where I want to be in my career eventually. And I said, I really want to ask you some questions. Is it okay if I just take you out for a cup of coffee? I feel like you're where I want to be. I literally said that to her. And she was like, oh, you're silly. Of course I'll have coffee with you. And now we have coffee every once in a while. And I can email her questions. When something comes up and I'm like, I have no idea what this means, I can email her. And sometimes it takes her a week or two to get back to me because she's very busy, because she's very important. But it's about doing the scary thing, like doing karaoke, and just asking and knowing that it will sound stupid, you will feel like a moron, and they will probably say yes.
One of the other cool things about having a mentor is just the accountability piece, in that, let's say you get a nutrition coach who requires you to log every bite you eat for 2 weeks so you can talk about why you have no energy. You're more likely to consider what you're putting into your body. So that alone is worth having the mentor, just to make you pay attention to yourself. I often think if I had somebody shadowing me in my practice room every morning when I warmed up, would I be warming up with more integrity, with more intention, with actual goals, or would I be slopping through it like I sometimes do when I'm feeling lazy? Oh, you better believe if I was live streaming that warm up to college students across the country, that would be some pretty focused work I'd be doing. This is amazing. Roni, I want to talk to you for hours more. I have 3 last rapid fire questions for you. You have given me, since I've known you, so many great book recommendations. You just gave me 2 more with Miracle Equation, right?
Miracle Equation is by Hal Elrod, and Slight Edge is by Jeff Olson.
Okay. What else are you reading right now? What's a go-to book that we all need to have in our Audible or on our bookshelf?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I just read The High Five Habit by Mel Robbins, and it's fabulous. I actually listened to it, but you could read it if you're not an audio person. It's fantastic. I enjoy her a lot. I'm actually going to dig into my Audible so I can tell you some things. I'm currently reading Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart, because my therapist told me to. And it's pretty good. It's not one that I would be like, this, you cannot live without. Oh, Atomic Habits, obviously, you know. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And if you don't feel like reading a whole book, just go to Google and look up Simon Sinek TED Talk. And you could just watch his TED Talk because it's fabulous. All of the You Are a Badass books. I think the best one of hers is You Are a Badass at Making Money.
Agreed.
And if you're in business, Pitch Anything. Again, like Jeff Olson, don't love Oren Klaff, the author, but the material is really useful.
Okay, what is one phrase that you wish we had in English that you have in Hebrew?
Oh my God. There's some words. There's 2 words that I can think of off the top of my head. So these aren't phrases, but they're words, and therefore they are concepts. One is lefargen, which means, it really just means to support, but it's more than to support. It's to it's a mixture of between supporting and championing and rooting for someone, right? It's all of that together as one concept. And the other one is titchadesh, which literally means may you be renewed, but you say it when somebody buys a new thing or gets a new thing. So if you got a new t-shirt, I would be like, oh, Chris, titchadesh, which means may you be renewed by this new t-shirt that you got. But the concept of it really, if you think about it, is about gratitude and how sometimes stuff can make you feel like a brand new person. And I think that's really neat.
I love it. All right, we're gonna work on those. Here's your last question. If there existed an actual honesty pill that could change one thing about you instantly, it could be adding a superpower or adding a skill or removing a weakness, your kryptonite, what would that be for you?
That is a really tough question, because I have spent, some decades here really falling in love with all of me. I think it would be, I want to live forever. And I know that it could get very lonely, so I want to live forever and make the people that I love live forever with me, which then becomes an overpopulation problem, and that's
No, it's a suspended reality thing. So I love that, and I want that too. Look, let's work on that, because we both want our.
I just want to know what happens. This is such an interesting story, life. And I know that I will die and I won't get to know how it ends. And I want to know, do we really burn the whole planet down? Do we get off the planet before we burn it down? I don't know. And I don't think I'll get to know, because I think that's going to happen beyond my lifetime.
Probably. Since we don't have those flying skateboards we were promised in Back to the Future, by now we might not be going to Mars in our lifetime. Roni, I know you have a family and need some time to relax on a Sunday. I want to thank you so much for spending an hour of time with me. I hope the rest of your day is awesome. Where can people find out about your next project, your work, all that stuff?
They can go to ronigeva.com, and they can find me on Instagram at the Roni Geva. You have to do the THE before, because there's another Roni Geva who already had an Instagram. And you can always message me on any of those things, and I usually will write back within a week.
You're amazing. I can't wait to work with you more within our coaching group sessions that you've got coming up, and see you socially as well.
Amen.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Big thanks to my friend Roni Geva. I hope you got something out of that conversation. I mean, now you know about comedy jail. You can impress your friends with your behind-the-scenes knowledge about how a romantic comedy is structured. You learn some Hebrew. And if you're considering quitting your instrument to become a stand-up comic, now you know a little bit more about what it takes to actually make it. And I think Roni just gave you like 10 books to check out. I know I'm adding a few of them to my list. And one more thing before I go, I just want to highlight a quote Roni mentioned during the interview, which is, "Greatness is determined by little tiny acts that you could or could not do every day." Something to think about as you make your way through the world. All right, everybody, this has been episode 34 of the Honesty Pill podcast. You can find out more at honestypill.com. And please, if you like what you're hearing on this podcast, become a subscriber to the Honesty Pill mailing list. I promise it's not boring. I won't spam you. It's actually a really cool community to be a part of. I give away tons of great information, breaking news about workshops I'm offering, and every now and then, even a free pair of tickets to the LA Phil in downtown Los Angeles. How can you beat that? Head over to honestypill.com/subscribe right now and join this awesome community. Okay, I am out of here. I got to go practice. Thanks for listening. See you next time.